Good evening and welcome to the Asheville City Council meeting. My name's Esther Manheimer, I'm Mayor of Asheville. I'm going to read a few things to you, some instructions so that we can move through this virtual format. All council members and staff are participating virtually. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. To help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city's website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone by dialing 855-925-2801 and entering the code 9928. We are also broadcasting live on the city's YouTube channel, Charter Cable Channel 193, and on AT&T Uverse Channel 99. For public comment, we ask callers to sign up in advance to join the live speaker queue. We will only be taking live comments from those who signed up prior to tonight's meeting. Those callers have been provided instructions on how to participate. Each caller is allotted 3 minutes to speak for each agenda item. We will hear live comments for up to 1 hour for each agenda item. A reminder to callers, you will first hear staff inform council that you're next to speak. Then you will hear an automated message letting you know you're unmuted and live in the meeting. You may begin speaking after the automated message. To best ensure staff can support you in case of technical difficulties, we ask that you join the speaker queue no later than the beginning of the agenda item before the agenda item on which you have signed up to speak. Additionally, if you've joined the speaker queue and need to disconnect before your time to speak, please hit *4 before hanging up. You can then call back in using the same directions I just shared, and staff will enter you back in the speaker queue of your agenda item. I'd like to ask those participating in tonight's public comment to follow council's rules of decorum. The rules include the following. Speakers are only allowed to speak one time during the public comment period for each agenda item. A person may speak only if they have signed up to speak in accordance with the city's procedures. Speaker substitutions at the meeting are not allowed. Each speaker is allotted 3 minutes to speak on an agenda item. In general, each agenda item will have up to a total of 1 hour for public comment. A speaker may not share or relinquish any remaining time they have not used to another speaker. Speakers should not expect council members or city staff to comment on or respond to speakers' comments during their 3 minutes. I'll now go through and introduce all the council members and staff leadership. Council and staff, as I say your name, please say a quick hello. Vice Mayor Smith.
Good evening.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Hello.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Hello.
Councilwoman Roney.
Hello.
Councilwoman Turner.
Good evening.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Hello.
City Manager Deborah Campbell.
Hello.
City Attorney Brad Branham.
Good evening.
And City Clerk Maggie Burleson.
Hello.
Okay, and as usual, we will begin the council agenda with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We do not have any proclamations on tonight's agenda, so I'm going to move into the consent agenda. Council, do any of you have any questions or comments regarding the consent agenda, or do I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Motion to adopt the consent agenda.
Mrs.
I'll second.
Who seconded it?
I'll second.
Okay, Sandra. Okay, great. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions, comments before I take a roll call vote?
Mayor, I do believe we have one person.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we do. Thank you, Brad, for reminding me of that. We do have one person signed up to speak under the consent agenda. So staff, if you could bring that person on.
Council, our caller for this item is Tracy Green Washington from West Asheville.
Hi, I'm Tracy Green Washington from West Asheville. I just have a couple of statements. It is with humility and grace that I'm speaking with you representing CoThink tonight pertaining to the donation to CoThink, an item that's listed on the consent agenda. I'm the founder of CoThink, a giving circle grounded in social change philanthropy principles. And we were founded in 2014 and are led by African-American Latinx leaders in Asheville and Western North Carolina that are committed to using our time, talent, and treasure to address some of the most critical issues impacting communities of color. We are a collective of social change philanthropists, grassroots leaders, change agents, and allies. And our work is centered in racial equity, and we anchor ourselves in the power of networks and create ripples towards shifting the narratives of communities of color. CoThink members and as a collective network recognizes that we are one organization of a groundswell of community-led organizations investing in the robust ecosystem of change in our community. And we wanted it to be on record that we do not take that trust for granted and are explicit about our commitment to collaboration and not competition. We will continue to support organizations and groups and leaders that are doing the heavy lift in the communities and collectively working to collaborate by centering racial equity. So in that spirit of anchoring deep in our values, we wanted to speak today to be able to do three things as a complementary action to the consideration of the consent agenda. First, we wanted to ensure that we were creating transparency for our community partners regarding this process, and wanted the community to know that regarding the donation and our internal CoThink work, that there were a number of things that happened. That we compiled a set of questions for the City of Asheville attorney who worked really well with us to make sure that we can move things forward, to gain clarity about the funding so that we can ensure that there was a final decision regarding the donation that informed our values and commitment to not be complicit in perpetuating inequities, but to really serve as a way to interrupt and redesign and reimagine systems. We asked questions about where the funds came from, where the funds are the result of harming community, where the funds are the result of harming and impacting communities of color, which we were able to determine it wasn't. We were asked if the funds were a grant donation. If it was determined that it was a grant, why wasn't there a public process that was implemented to ensure equitable access to this fund? And we also were able to determine that it wasn't a grant, that it was a donation. We clarified the type of reporting that would be required and what we were prepared to present to ensure equitable reporting practices that did not harm CoThink or were overly burdensome. And we asked for feedback regarding a donation agreement and were able to reach agreement after several exchanges, which included removal and inclusion of several components to ensure equity and transparency regarding reporting. Lastly, we request a review of the press release and the opportunity to speak at this meeting, which we're doing tonight. The second thing that I wanted to lift up really quickly is to clarify the structure of CoThink and what it really costs to do structure change. The total amount of settlement CoThink is slated to reach $400.
And I'm sorry there wasn't enough time for the caller's comments, but Ms. Green Washington, if you are listening, you could also email us with that information, and that would be very helpful. And we are excited to be able to provide these two grants under our consent agenda tonight to CoThink and to the Asheville City Schools Foundation.
Mayor, she has emailed her comments to council.
Okay, thank you, Maggie. Okay, we have no other folks signed up to speak under public comment under this item, so I'm going to take a roll call vote. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Here.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Okay, next we have two presentations tonight. The first is the financial audit presentation, and the city manager, Deborah Campbell, will start us off.
Yes, I'm just going to introduce Tony McDowell and Patricia Rosenberg, and they will provide you with the information that we will be getting from the auditor and a response from staff in terms of our next steps and how we are going to respond to some of the findings of the auditor. So Patricia, I think you're going to kick us off.
Sure, I'll be happy to. So I'm Patricia Rosenberg. I'm the internal auditor for the city, and one of my responsibilities is to manage our financial audit contract. And I'm happy to introduce to you Robbie Bittner. He is an audit partner from PB Mayors, but is representing RSM tonight, and he'll talk a little bit about that. But he's here to give you an overview of our financial audit for FY20. Thanks for being here, Robbie.
Thank you, Patricia. I'm hoping everyone can hear me okay. And are we going to be able to pull up the slides? There we go. Well, thank you very much. The date on here was the date we presented to the audit committee. But if we'll move on to the next slide, the first thing I'd like to say is thank you for allowing RSM to continue to serve the city. We do enjoy working with everyone there. We really enjoy when we can come to the city. Unfortunately, we were not able to much this year, but we hope that in the future that will change. I'll start off with that as Patricia mentioned, I'm a partner with PB Mayors. That is because as of December 1st, 2020, the offices in Morehead City and New Bern, North Carolina joined PB Mayors away from RSM. We are still a full Alliance Firm member, but just to clarify, the opinions for the current year audit are RSM opinions, and they was performed under all our RSM guidelines. So moving on from there, on the next slide, if you would, please. You can actually go ahead and go to. We're going to talk a little bit about the financial results of the city. The first thing is to sort of break down the financial statements as a whole. The comprehensive annual financial report is a very robust, large document. Starting off with the management discussion and analysis, this is really a comparison between sort of what happened in previous year and then also some budgetary outlook items. Then you start really at a very wide level with the government-wide financial statements. And as you move through the fund financial statements, the notes, and the other supplemental information, you really narrow down to get to the nitty-gritty details. And then followed up with that is statistical data over the last 10 to 15 years. And then finally, the compliance section where we report, you will see our reports on your compliance. So from there, as auditors, if we can move to the next slide, please. We can issue 4 different types of opinions. You know, our task is to assess whether or not we believe that your financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. The adverse opinion is the worst that you can receive, stating that you did not, that your financial statements are not presented in accordance with GAAP. We can disclaim an opinion, which means that we did not receive enough information to even render an opinion. We can issue a qualified or modified opinion, which is really an except for opinion, where we believe everything is fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, except for one place. And then the highest level of assurance we can provide is a unmodified or clean opinion, which the city did receive a clean opinion on their financial statements this year. If you'll move on to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the general fund revenues as a whole. As you can see, ad valorem taxes makes up the majority of the city's general fund revenues, along with other taxes, followed by intergovernmentals, downward charges for services, and other items. I bring that up, and to the next slide, you can see that over the course of the last 5 years, ad valorem taxes really has been ticking up a little bit by little bit. And as you move to the next slide, you'll see that that's not necessarily because you're raising tax rates, but that's just because the value of property is going up in the city. But I also bring to your attention here, the Local Government Commission of North Carolina puts out every year some comparative numbers for similar sized municipalities in North Carolina. In your peer group, you have, I think, 12 other municipalities that are greater than 50,000 in population that do not have an electric system. And as you can see that your tax rates are lower than a lot of those areas, and then also lower than municipalities statewide. Moving on to the next, you'll see that One of the biggest things you want to do is make sure you collect property taxes. While that looks like a huge drop down in 2020, there was, of course, an anticipated drop given the COVID-19 pandemic. But also, if you'll move to the next slide, I'll show you that the city is still well above the average for similar sized cities and statewide when it comes to property tax collections. And just so you know, the comparative numbers are obviously for June 30th, 2019, since they have not released the 2020 results yet. But I would anticipate this particular average to fall dramatically for both similar sized cities and statewide. From the revenue side, we'll move on to the next slide, talking about expenditures. As with most municipalities, public safety between fire, EMS, police typically covers the vast majority of the expenditures of the city. And then you can go onto the next there to see the growth of those expenditures slowly ticking up. But as you can see, if you remember back to the revenues, sort of ticking up in line with those revenues year over year. Moving on to the next slide, we'll talk about the fund balance. And this is, what does the city have that they can hold on to and spend in future years? And as you can see, the city's fund balance is growing year over year. And then with the next slide, we'll show you that the unassigned fund balance, which is the amount that's really truly available to spend, is about 18 million of the 93. You have items such as your non-spendables. These are everything from inventories to the notes payable in the community development loan program. Restricted, which is a stabilization by state statute. It's a formula-driven item that's listed out in General Statute number 159. And then you have committed to community and economic development, and then assigned to various projects throughout the city at the end of the current year. The next slide will show you your percentage fund balance as a percentage of your expenditures. So as you can see, this means that the city's carrying not too much fund balance compared to how much they spend each year. So it's spending wisely. And as you'll see, that number fluctuates year over year depending on what's in the budget. Similar sized cities are a little bit higher in the amount of unassigned fund balance that they have, but statewide is significantly higher. But that's more of a scale based on magnitude. Smaller municipalities are going to have a much larger percentage just because the dollars are smaller. So from there, I'll talk to you a little bit about our compliance results on the 2 slides over here. As auditors of governmental entities that not only are stewards of public funds, but also receive grants from the federal government and the state government, we're tasked with presenting a report on your compliance with laws, regulations, grants, and contracts. And in that report, we also report any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal control that we identify through the course of our audit. In addition to that, we also issue our opinion on your compliance with those federal and state grants that you receive each year. And we would also report any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal control as it relates to your compliance with those state and federal grants. So moving on to the next slide, we'll show that this year we had 2 major federal programs and then 2 major state programs. The Coronavirus Relief Fund, or the CARES Act dollars that came out late in the fiscal year for 2020 was one of those. And the other one is the National Infrastructure Investments, or the Tiger 6 grant. And then your state system non-street aid allocation, or commonly known as PAL bill, and SMAP were the 2 major state programs tested. We will skip through the next couple of slides, and I'll just talk about them all at one time. So, as I mentioned earlier, in the report on internal control and compliance, we are required to disclose any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal control that we identify. A significant deficiency is a deficiency in internal control that is severe enough to warrant attention by those charged with governance, but not necessarily as severe as a material weakness. And a material weakness is a deficiency in internal control that either has or has the high potential of causing a material misstatement in the financial statements. We did have one material weakness in internal control this year, related specifically to the year-end closeout procedures. It's on the next slide, sorry. And with that, it's really if you remember a couple of years ago in 2018, we also issued a similar deficiency around the closeout procedures. I will say that this was exacerbated significantly by the turnover that happened in the finance department. And I also want to reiterate that this is not indicative of any kind of issues throughout the course of the year, that it's really just around the final closeout process and getting the financial statements prepared. So moving on 2 slides from there, we did not have any control deficiencies from the previous year to update you on. So that sort of wraps up the compliance section of our report. And the final piece of our report, moving on to the next section, is what we call our AUC 260, or the auditor's communication with those charged with governance. These are required communications that each one of the board members would have received a separate letter. I'm just going to hit a couple of high notes on here. On the next slide, we'll show that there were no new GASB standard implementations this year due to COVID. The GASB granted a 12-month reprieve for all standards except for statement number 87, which received an 18-month delay. We'll move on down one more slide from there. We did have several audit adjustments. These are all related to the year-end closeout that we had. There were a couple of uncorrected misstatements also related to the year-end closeout issue. We did not have any disagreements with management. And the only significant item that we discussed during the course of the audit on the next page is related to specifically the year-end closeout, and primarily related to the turnover that was occurring at the city during that point in time. With that concludes the presentation. I will say that this year was significantly more difficult than in the past, not necessarily because of the issues, but by having to be remote all the time. COVID-19 really affecting everyone around throughout the whole group. And I do really want to thank the finance department, especially those that are there now, that stepped in and really got the ball rolling to really get us moving and get it to where we get it done. So Mr. McDowell and your team, and then Patricia, of course, as y'all stepped in, we really say thank you, because it's not easy stepping into something that you're not fully a part of and then having to figure out how to get it to the end. So we do say thank you to that. And from there, I'd be glad and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bittner. If there aren't any questions, I think we can turn it to Tony for him to respond to the issues that were raised. And I also want to echo Mr. Bittner before I turn it over to our finance director. Comments made by Mr. Bittner in terms of the entire finance department stepping up. And they received a lot of work, but they came through as best they could. And Mr. McDowell is going to talk about how we won't let this happen again. Mr. McDowell.
Well, thank you, Ms. Campbell, and thank you, Robbie. As you mentioned, I stepped in late December and early January, and have been working closely with you and your team since then, and working with Patricia as well. And I really enjoyed working with you all. It's been the first time in about 5 or 6 years that I've been involved in working on the comprehensive annual financial report. Wish it could have been done under slightly different circumstances than we could have done it in person and such. But just wanted to quickly say a few things about the finding that Robbie mentioned. And I think we have a couple of slides if we could just pull those up. I'll run through those quickly. So just to kind of follow up, as Mr. Bittner mentioned, there was one material weakness that was identified with this audit. It was similar to a material weakness that they identified a couple years ago, and it relates specifically to the year-end closeout and the lack of documented policies and procedures around that closeout. And it was really magnified this year, as Mr. Bittner mentioned, by the turnover in the finance department. And if you go on to the next slide, we did have significant turnover. The city's controller and financial reporting manager, who had been the two leads on the audit the last couple of years, both left during the summer and fall of 2020. And so that created some significant issues. And then, as you all know, Finance Director Barbara Whitehorn also left as well. And so we did have significant turnover. We did have some folks who stepped up in financial reporting and really did a great job with Robbie's team on the audit. And I'd like to mention Holly Ohm by name. She was one of our accountants. She's only been with the city for a couple of years, but she really stepped up and led us through much of the audit this year. And the fact that we got over the finish line was really due to the extraordinary work that Holly did to get us there. So, but we are taking some steps to identify and correct those weaknesses that were identified, specifically on the hiring front. We have filled the controller position. Our new controller started in January. He's a former assistant finance director for a town in Oregon. He's on board now and is actually moving out here to Asheville in just a couple of weeks. We've also filled the financial reporting manager job. Holly Ohm, who I mentioned, who did such a great job on the audit, is now in that position. And then, of course, as you all know, we have filled the finance director position as well. We're also looking, we do still have some vacancies in the finance department, and we're evaluating those vacancies and to potentially bolster our staff in the financial reporting area so that we have more staff involved and more eyes on the information that we're submitting next year. And then we're also working to develop some checklists and guidelines so that the year-end closeout process goes more smoothly this year, and that we're able to provide PB mayors with the data in a more timely fashion, and that the data is accurate when we send it to them initially. We're going to be working with PB mayors to make sure that we are on target with developing that guideline or developing that checklist and those guidelines. And we're also exploring possibility of contracting with an outside firm to help us develop those guidelines as well. So next slide, please. So I think that's it. Happy to answer any questions. I will say, very happy to hear that, once again, we had an unmodified clean opinion on our audit. I'd also like to mention just quickly, we have been out in the debt market, or actually getting ready to go out in the debt market here in the next week or so. And we've been having meetings with the local government commission as well as with Moody's and Standard & Poor's over the last couple of weeks. And they've asked us some questions about our audit and such. And we've gotten very good feedback from them. They've been very complimentary of our overall financial management, and hope to be able to share some of the reports and feedback we got from them very soon. But they have reaffirmed our current debt ratings. And so no impact or no change to our debt ratings. And we remain a AAA GO bond city. So thank you all. Happy to answer any questions.
If there are no questions, Mayor, we will conclude our presentation. And thanks again, Mr. Bittner, for your time.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We have one other presentation for this evening, and that is the manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, good evening. As soon as we get the presentation pulled up, this is going to be actually almost a summary of information that was shared at your retreat. It is going to be an update on the strategies, kind of your priorities that you adopted or agreed upon in 2019 As you know, last year was just an incredible, difficult year, and we didn't do a lot in terms of providing updates on progress made. So we elected to do that at this past retreat, and thought we would share it with the community as well tonight. Next slide, please. So in 2016, you all, this was definitely before I came here, council adopted a vision statement, a statement that essentially encompassed a long-term vision of, or at least a 10-year vision of the kind of community that you wanted Asheville to be within this time frame. This vision statement has actually been used to develop policies and priorities, and it is something that we frequently go back to, especially as it relates to staff reports. We make linkages and so forth whenever we bring things to council. I'm not going to read the vision statement. I was extending my comments so that you all could read the statement as for yourself. But next slide. If you take that vision statement and kind of summarize it into strategic kind of core themes, that vision statement would then translate into this framework of themes in terms of the kind of community that we want Asheville to be. Equitable and diverse, transportation and accessibility, a thriving local economy, connected and engaged, well-planned and livable, clean and healthy environment, a quality affordable housing, and a financially resilient city. And so what I will do is to provide you with the strategies that are included under these core themes. Next slide, please. That were adopted in 2019. And there were 12 that you all agreed to. And the 13th was one that we thought was important to add because it's fundamentally the foundation, the core services that we provide to the city. Not that these others aren't, but they were kind of special or more strategic initiatives that we undertook. Next slide, please. I'm going to provide kind of a summary of these initiatives. I won't definitely provide as much information as we went into at your retreat. There is a more detailed representation and accounting of our accomplishments, and you can go to this website to get that document. And it's also linked to tonight's City Council agenda if you want more detailed information. Next slide, please. So what I will be doing is providing you again the core themes or focus areas, talk about the strategy, which it relates to that listing of 13 strategies. So when I say strategy number 1, it will link to that list of the 13 strategies underneath this kind of core theme. So strategy 1, implement phase 1 recommendations of the Transit Master Plan. And just quickly in terms of accomplishments, we implemented at least a good portion of the first year Transit Master Plan by increasing services by 25%, as well as increasing on-time performance that went from about 55 to 60% to over 70%. Next slide, please. Under quality and affordable housing, strategy 2 was to develop a strategy for lease or sale of city-owned land and incentivize affordable housing development. And I know with the issues that we have around homeless and encampments, which Kathy Ball is going to provide you with a little bit of an update here shortly. This is an incredible challenge for not only the city of Asheville, but throughout the country. I think Asheville has taken some tremendously aggressive steps to try to address this issue. We've adopted, or you all adopted, the policies for implementing affordable housing on city-owned land. That happened in late 2019. And we've seen results of that policy already. 360 Hilliard will be opening with 34 affordable units, with the affordability extending out to 50 years. That will happen hopefully this summer of 2021. Next slide, please. And so I know these strategies are not going to be numerically in order because this would read as strategy 6, but we're trying to lump it under these key themes. So our strategy 6 was to review and update the comprehensive housing affordability strategy. Again, with trying to assess whether these tools are encouraging the type of development that is desired in our community. And we think that we have. That for the most part, the majority of the units that have been built in our community are below the 60% AMI. And that is where we have the biggest need. And we think that with these tools, we are being able to be responsive to that income group. Not to say that we have cracked this nut because it is hugely difficult, but we think we are making some progress. Next slide, please. And so I'd like to ask Kathy Ball, who is an assistant city manager and is coordinating the issues around homelessness in our community as it relates to the city manager's office. So Kathy, if you could.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Campbell.
Take over.
I do want to take this opportunity to update council on the work that staff is doing, as well as the goals around homelessness. As indicated in your budget work session, we know that this is an issue that you all have directed us to work on, and we're working with community partners on as well. We wanted to take a quick opportunity to remind you of what our goals are as they pertain to working with our homeless individuals. The first goal that we have is to provide shelter options for individuals. We want to create permanent housing options for individuals. We want to treat all individuals with dignity and respect, and to provide a safe community for unhoused and housed individuals. As you all are probably very much aware, we have an increase in the number of houseless populations in our community, as well as communities across the country. We did have a situation where an encampment was very quickly removed on Lexington Avenue underneath 240. And we had a lot of our communities that had concern about the way and the manner that was done. We have had recent significant safety issues and concerns that have necessitated the removal, us moving forward with removal of homeless encampments in park areas and the areas that you can see below. These are due to safety issues around violence between those folks camping, as well as toward individuals who live in those neighborhoods as well. So we are taking those steps in partnership with our other community partners in doing notifications. And in almost all of the situations, we are giving a minimum of 7-day notice. And then in some cases, a maximum of 30-day notice, depending on the situation. Next slide, please. So we wanted to talk a little bit, and again, this was discussed in the budget work session as it pertains to funds that will be coming in through the American Recovery Plan. We have a short-term solution that we're working on with our community partners. The first one is to open up a Code Purple shelter to operate every night, regardless of weather conditions. Again, our goal is to provide shelter to folks who are not sheltered and are homeless within our city. So being able to provide that extra space is critical. We want to increase our partnership with Homeward Bound to monitor and remove encampments where safety concerns exist. And again, that process is done with dignity and respect for all individuals, and giving notice and following up with people and providing information about their needs. And lastly, I just want to briefly mention, you'll hear much more about this. We are working with the county and other nonprofits and partners on a long-term solution that I'm just referring to as a path to stable housing. That is our goal, again, for all of our homeless folks. We do have a moment in time. We have an opportunity to utilize American Recovery Plan funding to assist in kind of a strategic process of developing a community EMT partnership with the county, a crisis care center, and a low barrier shelter for the homeless community. I'll turn it back over to you, Ms. Campbell.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Kathy. And so I will continue with the theme of an equitable and diverse community. Strategy 3 is to expand partnerships, particularly with Asheville City Schools, through the Equity Collaborative to eliminate disparities in access to quality schools and other educational resources. So there's been a number of things that we have been able to accomplish. And I would say a lot of the accomplishments is really due to the willingness of our partners to partner. And so our efforts with the Equity Collaborative, which actually has stopped meeting, but is kind of morphing into a new initiative called United for Youth that United Way is spearheading and has been working on. We've collaborated on the creation of pods within our community centers. We've worked with the Housing Authority and provided resources to help with broadband connection and access. And council changed their whole strategic partnership fund requirements and program focus on eliminating the opportunity gap and working with our partners to do that. Next slide, please. Continuing with equitable and diverse community, strategy 7 would be to develop and implement a strategy based on the NLC report to foster economic mobility. This was a particular or specific type of document that talked about a number of strategies recommended throughout the country that a lot of communities were initiating around economic mobility. We have a number of those initiatives that are currently underway, and essentially economic mobility relates to essentially trying to build a foundation for generational wealth. And we're doing it through a number of our homeownership programs, through loan programs, specifically targeting minority and women-owned businesses. And also council this past fall unanimously adopted a reparations resolution. Next slide, please. The next themed area is a well-planned and livable community. Strategy 4 is to develop specific implementation plan and schedule to amend the UDL and ordinances to reflect recommendations in the comprehensive plan. Although we have not, develop a strategy and a funding mechanism to amend the entire UDO, we have taken a few steps in terms of some key regulatory changes that are needed, like regulations related to new hotel development. And we think that was pretty innovative. We are getting calls from a number of communities around the public benefits table that you all adopted related to hotel development. Urban centers, urban place rezoning, that's currently underway. We hope to bring that to you soon. And then the Asheville shared space. As a result of the pandemic, we had to relax and rethink how public space is allocated for various uses in order to support businesses. We think that some of those lessons learned will carry through with more changes to our Unified Development Ordinance. Next slide, please. Strategy 12 was to complete some corridor studies, and those have been completed. Probably, not probably, but they haven't been through the adoption process, the Hendersonville Road corridor study, as well as the Tunnel Road corridor study. A lot of the public input has been completed. There's some additional work needed to finalize the reports in order to bring those to council for action. Next slide, please. Under thriving local economy, strategy 5 was to develop a business inclusion program. And we are so pleased that you all took action in October to adopt that policy. It's a race and gender conscious policy that is for the city of Asheville to increase our procurement and doing business with small and minority and women-owned businesses. And you can see a number of the other things that we are doing in order to support implementation of that policy. The policy is great, but we need to put it into action, and we're doing a number of things that I think are setting us up for, we hope, success, and not only success for the city of Asheville, but hopefully with, again, minority and women-owned businesses, and providing them opportunities to take on city projects. Next slide, please. And so the environment, clean and healthy environment. Strategy 8 was to reduce municipal carbon footprint by 4% per year, 80% total reduction by 2050. I think one of the most important initiatives, and it's one that you all actually approved as part of the consent agenda today, was the aggregated solar RFP with Buncombe County. That's a collaborative with a number of the communities within Buncombe County to look at us collectively having an assessment of our facilities and buildings and the appropriateness or the potential for us to have solar units applied to roofs and a number of other things related to the use of solar energy. And we appreciate you all approving that tonight. Next slide, please. Strategy number 9 under the financially resilient city is participate in the Buncombe County Tourist Development Authority Management and Planning Initiative related to capital investments for high priority projects. We went through that process with TDA, and as you know, with the change in leadership and with the pandemic, things kind of came to a screeching halt. We are still working with the leadership of BCTDA, and we will be working with them to try to understand next steps. Next slide, please. Strategy 10, identify opportunities to fund transit service via a dedicated revenue stream. You all have gone on record to restore the State Maintenance Assistance Program, or the SMAP program, and you are also supported legislation to conduct a referendum on a quarter-cent sales tax for transit. One of the most challenging issues related to transit is not only having drivers and buses, but it's the ability to fund those services. And we have in the past been funding a lot of our transit service either through federal grants or through just local revenue and general fund. And coming from a city like Charlotte, who has a very, very extensive and robust transit system, we just need more funding. And hopefully we will be allowed that opportunity. Next slide, please. Strategy 11, identify opportunities to develop new tax revenue. We've done outreach. We've looked at a number of opportunities, the food and beverage tax, occupancy tax, and again, the quarter-cent sales tax. We've had, as I said, lots of outreach meetings and are still considering certainly moving forward with the quarter-cent sales tax for consideration. Next slide, please. And we're getting close to the end, I promise you. A financially resilient city, strategy 13. Again, invest needed financial and staff resources to address maintenance, new construction, and operational needs. At your budget session, you heard about particularly our unmet capital needs of being $700 million. This isn't necessarily unusual for most communities. But for our community, we have not been on a regular cycle of bond referendums or creating different ways other than, again, the general fund to finance these types of facilities. I think you, again, heard a lot about that in our work session when we introduced the concept of our capital improvement program. There's a lot of backlog. There's always, in city government, there's always more need than resources. But we hope that we are able to, with laser focus on those core services of sidewalks and streetlights and kind of rethinking and relooking at those kinds of investments. We hope that we will be able to accelerate, we hope, our ability to respond to these needs. Next slide. One of the things that I think we can definitely celebrate is the investment in the River Arts District and literally the transformative thing that has been done as it relates to an investment in public amenities. And I'm going to ask Stephanie Dahl with the Planning Department if she could come on and provide us with some update on a real exciting opportunity, our grand opening celebration. Steph.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell, and thank you, Mayor and Council. We do have cause to celebrate. The RADTIP is just days away from being complete, and this work and the much larger work of transforming the River Arts District so that it looks a lot more like the Wilma Dykeman Riverway as envisioned in our adopted plans and with our community would not have happened without an incredible community partnership that has lasted for probably a dozen years now. So the community at large has a lot of success. Some of those things that you can see right here. It includes some of the work that the city's done, but it also points out that for instance, the River Arts District artists have been able to add over 100 more artists to their district in the past 10 years, even through massive change and construction that they're doing well. One of the things I think that our community is most excited about is the 9 acres of new green space and the 2 miles of greenway that have come online at a perfect time during our long tail of COVID recovery. So all of that, to be said, over the past 10 years of work, it took a village, and it's going to take a village for us to celebrate. So what we've decided to do is hold a month-long COVID-safe celebration that we are crowdsourcing and depending on many of our partners. And I'm just going to name a few randomly: Connect Buncombe, UNC Asheville, Asheville Bee City, Asheville on Bikes, the Weekend Neighborhood, RADBA, Grind Coffee. And about 10 more folks are going to produce events. Some of them will be one-offs. Some of them will happen reoccurring during that month. And I'm going to ask everybody to save the date of Friday, April 23rd at noon, where we will have an opportunity to have an online hour-long opportunity to get a large group together to celebrate and talk to some people about how the project happened, thank our funders, and maybe listen to some music and share some smiles. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate that. Next slide, please. And so I said earlier, I promise you we were getting to the end. Well, we are getting to the end. One of the themes or buckets that wasn't a part of your 13 that was identified as the connected and engaged community. And it would, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this, because we spent so much of our time in 2020 reaching out to people, for the most part in response to COVID, learning how to do things virtually. So we learned a lot as it relates to how we need to connect and engage with the community. Our effort around reimagining public safety and all the engagements, and now we're in the second phase of that's kind of wrapped into the budget process. APD launched their community engagement division and their tip to APD, and we've had relatively good success with that new outreach tool. The Vance Monument, and just a number of other things. Next slide. So going into your 2021-2022 council priorities, just wanted to remind the public that this is where we are, what you all have committed to for the next year. That was a look at the past that I just went through: reparations, employee compensation study, reimagining public safety, and COVID relief spending and investment, prioritizing recovery funding. It's where we're going to spend a lot of our energy over the next year. It was really, really important for me to share with you all those 13, to also reinforce to the community that those 13 haven't been forgotten, that we're going to continue to work on those things, but we're going to be laser focused on reparations, employee compensation study, reimagining public safety and COVID relief spending, and trying to find a way for us to move those initiatives the same way and with the speed and attention that we moved those other 13 that I mentioned. So with that, I think the next slide is, if you want, again, to have more information about what we have done and information that I just shared with you, please go to this website and or this link, which is also attached in the City Council agenda, for additional information. And I really, really appreciate your attention. As I said earlier during our budget work session, it's been a long day for you all, and we just appreciate what you do. Thank you. And I'll take any questions if you all have any.
Deborah, this is Kim.
Yes,
thank you for
Kim.
the presentation. I'm a little upset. So in the light of all the work that's been done, there's a shadow. And I just have a couple questions first. So for our neighbors experiencing homelessness who've been displaced and will be displaced, do we know how many have chosen the option provided for temporary housing?
I'm going to ask Kathy if she can help respond to that question, because I don't know, Kim.
Councilman Roney, we do not have an answer for that. We offer up and we provide information about locations and the number of beds that are available. I think we keep that information, but we do not know what the choice of that individual is.
But I would offer, though, Kathy, to note that when we were meeting with Homeward Bound about this process and making it clear to everyone that there are shelter options, there is capacity, and folks are choosing not to in many cases for the shelter option, which of course is their choice, but it's not a matter of not having the capacity. Just to make sure that's clear.
So when folks are evicted, because downtown is like close proximity to food and work and health and human services, where are we sending them? Do we know the answer? Maybe that's something that comes over time. Follow up.
Is your question, where are we sending them?
Like, where do they go? They just don't go there.
We provide them information. I think it would be the same as I said before, Kim. We provide them with information about shelters that are available, and all of those are located downtown. And we hope that they will go to those shelters. That is our goal, and that is the encouragement that we provide to them, because they are in proximity to all the locations where food would be available and other resources that folks need.
And as we said at the it's been a couple of presentations ago, we know we don't have all of the solutions right now to this issue. God, I wish we did. We don't. But we do know that we have got to keep people safe for those that are homeless, as well as for people in the surrounding neighborhoods. I think I can sincerely say that this community is working awfully hard. We need a lot more resources to provide what Kathy just presented in terms of all of the other types of shelters, low barrier shelters, that may help reach more people, Kim, I think. And we know that that's a missing link in our chain.
So I'm just going to speak for myself, because we have a reputation of being progressive and welcoming. Sorry, I'm really upset. And an inclusive place, and we're marketed as such. We also have such visible disparities because we have abundant resources. And we're in Appalachia. We have a rich history of taking care of each other, the really rough times, and sharing what we have. So I just want to express that I'm embarrassed that we're evicting people in the name of safety. Thank you. I'll also add that if any partners or compassionate neighbors who have ideas for solutions and want to participate in this with us, we need more people, we need more solutions, and we need more resources. So I certainly hope folks that are following will reach out.
Thank you, Mayor. If there are any questions, that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Okay, that concludes the presentation, our presentations portion of the agenda. And I'm going to move to the unfinished business items. Folks, we have one unfinished business item, but it requires two separate votes regarding the 2020-2021 annual action plan. And before we have a vote, we're going to have a presentation from the Community Development Programs Director, Paul D'Angelo. And this is really just because this is kind of a complicated issue. We technically had the public hearing on it with the presentation at the last meeting, and we took public comment on it. So we're not hearing further public comment, but we thought it would be helpful to have Paul come and kind of re-up and explain this one again before we vote, just in case folks are watching interested in this item. Thank you, Paul.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor and Vice Mayor, City Council, and City Management. Paul D'Angelo here tonight from Community and Economic Development. And we do have a small presentation for you all. Is that available to be shared? Great, thank you so much. And next slide, please, for this amendment to the 2021 Annual Action Plan. So the Community and Economic Development Department is seeking authorization for the city manager to submit an amendment to the 2021 HUD Annual Action Plan to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, authorizing the $1.6 million in CDBG, Community Development Block Grant Program income from the sale of Charlotte Street to be used to purchase 65 Ford Street. Next slide. And a few summary slides here regarding some funding. The City of Asheville receives approximately $1 million in our HUD CDBG annual allocation for our community partners. The city can't have more than 1.5 million, 1.5 that annual allocation or our spend rate on May 1st, which is our timeliness test, to comply with HUD that we are spending these dollars in the community in a timely manner. The city currently has approximately $2 million in allocated CDBG funds. with the $1.6 million in CDBG program income from the sale of Charlotte Street, our balance is $3.6 million. We need to spend $2.1 million by May 1st, $1.5 million for the purchase of 65 Ford Street, and $600,000 on our subrecipients already under contract to pass our timeliness test. Next slide. City staff has discussed this $1.6 million in CDBG program income since late fall of 2019 because of the large dollar amount and the HUD timeliness test. The original plan was to close on the Charlotte Street sale after May 1st, 2020 to provide more time and hence more options on how we could spend these dollars. Unfortunately, with COVID and normal real estate delays, the city did not receive the $1.6 million in proceeds until late December 2020 and early 2021, and immediately began communicating with city management about spend options, now very limited with the timeliness test. Next slide. For the purchase of 65 Ford Street, the purchase was far enough along in the process with council approval, due diligence, and HUD environmental work to be able to close with this funding on or around April 23rd, 2021. The purchase is a strategic use of these funds as this purchase meets the national CDBG objective, is an eligible activity, follows a high priority in the HUD consolidated plan, is timely, and keeps us HUD compliant. HUD has a longstanding policy of reducing the next year's grant allocation of a grantee that continues to be untimely and may take corrective actions as needed to remedy the deficiency, including sanctions. Next slide. So for this evening and the recommendation, staff recommends the purchase of 65 Ford Street and use of CDBG funds for the following reasons. This $1.5 million purchase of 65 Ford Street invests program income back into the community with the intent of the land being used for affordable housing, including home ownership. This land purchase is an eligible use of CDBG program income, is timely to remain HUD compliant, and frees up affordable housing bond dollars that are less restrictive than HUD dollars. And lastly, these funds were accounted for in the fiscal 2021 HUD annual action plan, and staff has been working in tandem with HUD for guidance on this program income and diligently to move this funding into the community and pass the timeliness test. Next slide. And with that, I hope that provided a summary for this evening, and I am happy to take any questions.
Any questions? All right, council, if there aren't any questions on this, again, as I mentioned, needs two motions. The first would be a motion to adopt a resolution to amend the city's 2020-2021 annual action plan to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. That seems kind of general. Is that the, there's not a more specifically worded motion somewhere that I'm not looking at right now, hopefully. Okay, no one's telling me there is. Do I have a motion to adopt a resolution to amend the resolution to amend the city's 2020-2021 annual action plan to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development?
So moved.
Sandra, you said that? Yes, Sandra. Okay. Do I have a second?
This is Gwen, second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. I'm going to do a roll call vote.
Before we do the roll call vote, Esther, can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
So I've been having a hard time getting to a yes on this one. So I feel like I have to explain myself a little bit based on the questions I've been getting and hearing. So I think we have an opportunity here for a both and I know that I share a lot of these concerns with my colleagues. We have an obligation to invest in DReview with DReview, and we have an obligation to address the harms of urban renewal and redlining with the neighbors, especially the Black community impacted by urban renewal and redlining. So we can't continue harm and displacement by pushing people to the outskirts and outside of access to infrastructure and visibility and outside of the city school system. So I understand, I hear the complex situation that we're in here, but this conversation I don't think is over yet because we still have resources to address and we still have issues at hand that are overlapping. So I will name that I hear the request for the Asheville Buncombe Community Land Trust to be at the table with us as we continue these conversations because of their partnership with us and because their guaranteed permanent affordable housing is a part of their mission and our housing crisis is worsening. So I'm going to vote yes on this tonight.
Thank you. Any other comments before we vote? Okay, I'm going to do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Vice Mayor Smith.
To meet the timeliness test and because there are limited options at the table, aye.
Thank you. Okay, and then the second part of this, I need a motion to adopt a budget amendment to increase the amount of the fiscal year 2020-2021 Community Development Block Grant Fund budget to include $1.6 million from the sale of city-owned land originally purchased through the Urban Renewal Program in the 1970s. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Okay.
This is Gwen. I'll second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any comments before we vote on this item?
Just a quick comment. I really appreciate the extra time and attention to explain more and create and have Paul here tonight. I think much to what Shanika said, there is some background here, and I just wanted to share in that and say thank you for the extra information so that we could communicate it properly with the community.
Thank you. Okay, and I will do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Myself, aye. And Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, we have two items of new business tonight. The first is a resolution approving the loan modification requested by Mountain Housing Opportunities to allow them to maintain affordable housing conditions at 61, 63, 65, and 67 Annandale, 6 Trinity Chapel, and 280 Merriman Avenue by extending the maturity dates and eliminating yearly interest payments in exchange for an additional 20-year affordability period and rent restrictions raised to 60% of AMI. And Paul is still here because Paul is presenting this item as well.
Thank you, Mayor and Vice Mayor. Good evening again, City Council and City Management. Paul D'Angelo with the Community and Economic Development Department to talk about this extending the maturity date for Mountain Housing Opportunity. A little background in your staff report this evening. From the early 1990s to the mid-2000s, Mountain Housing Opportunity was committed to developing smaller scattered site rental housing for some of the most low-income households in Asheville. Utilizing Section 108 and CDBG loans from the City of Asheville, Mountain Housing acquired and renovated 6 older properties that created 22 affordable units. Mountain Housing primarily used the Section 108 funded CARET loan program, which provided low interest rates for investors of affordable housing. Each of these loans will become due over the next 4 years. Between May 4th, 2000 and March 15th, 2004, the City of Asheville extended 5 loans to Mountain Housing for 5 properties, 6163 Annandale, 6567 Annandale, 6567 Annandale, separate there, 6 Trinity Chapel, and 280 Merriman. Mountain Housing has found that operating cash flow from older renovated properties is not sufficient to pay debt service and build replacement reserves for future capital needs due to the high maintenance costs associated with the age of the buildings. The properties currently operate at a break-even level. Per Mountain Housing, the pandemic has exacerbated this issue due to some tenants' inability to pay rent. Deferring the debt will allow MHO to build the necessary reserves to maintain these aging properties. The Community Development Division attempts to work with our development partners who wish to extend their affordability periods, add additional affordable units, etc. If rents are raised to 60% AMI, we did want to notate that this would apply only to new and future tenants. Existing tenants would not be affected by this increase in area median income. Council goal of quality affordable housing, and this was passed unanimously at Housing and Community Development Committee on March 16th. The pros here is affordable units are preserved for an additional 20 years while also protecting future program income that may result from the sale of the property, or if the units are no longer affordable, and these units do accept vouchers. The cons, the city will no longer earn approximately $25,000 in annual interest on these loans. The interest is received as program income to community development block grant funding. The major fiscal impact here is this is no effect on the general fund at all. And you have a suggested motion this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions. And James Dennis with Mountain Housing is also here tonight to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions? Thanks, James, for attending in the event there were any questions. We don't have anyone signed up to speak on this item. So I'm going to go ahead and ask if there is a motion to adopt a resolution approving the loan modification requested by Mountain Housing Opportunities to allow them to maintain affordable housing conditions at 61, 63, 65, and 67 Annandale, 6 Trinity Chapel, and 280 Merriman Avenue by extending the maturity dates and eliminating yearly interest payments in exchange for an additional 20-year affordability period and rent restrictions raised to 60% of AMI.
Mayor, this is Antoinette. So moved.
Okay.
I'll second. This is Sage.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments before we do our roll call vote? Okay, Councilwoman Roney.
One quick comment, just one quick comment to really say I really appreciate this move on behalf of MHO for coming to us and coming up with a creative solution. We spent a lot of time, effort, and money to try and create 20 years of affordability, and I think this is a great solution. I just wanted to give a shout out to them. Thank you.
Okay, ready? Councilwoman Roney.
Supporting the leadership of the HCD committee, aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
And Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
You made the, well, yeah, okay. I assume so. You made the motion. Okay, so it passed. Thank you very much. Our last item of new business item B is regarding boards and commissions, and I'm going to turn it over to the Vice Mayor to conduct this portion.
Thank you. We met for boards and commissions this morning, and we have made the following recommendations. For the audit committee, the boards and commissions committee recommend the reappointment of Amy Kemp in the CPA seat and the appointment of Andrew Emery for the vacated seat. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, with the motion and a second, I'll do a roll call vote. Mayor.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Nay.
And myself, aye. For Board of Adjustment, the Boards and Commissions Committee recommends Wendy Tabb for appointment to the vacant alternate seat. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, I'll do a roll call vote for approval. Mayor Manheimer.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
And myself, aye. For the Mountain Community Capital Fund Operating Committee, the committee recommends reappointment of both eligible members, Dee Williams and Lynn Smith. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, I'll do a roll call vote for approval. Mayor,
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore,
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney,
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye, and I have a very weird time lag. If we could pause after this.
Okay. Councilwoman Whistler,
Aye.
and myself, aye.
I'm
All right,
sorry,
great.
Vice Mayor, I did not get who seconded that motion.
I don't remember.
I did.
I couldn't tell. I'm having the weirdest sound issues. No one else?
I am too. And Antoinette seconded.
Thank you.
We're having issues. Okay.
My issue is that I see you talking, I hear it like 5 seconds later, and then the next person's already talked, and it's very strange. I don't know if pausing would help.
Okay.
Can we got one more to go, right?
One more to go, and it's almost over.
Well, and then maybe we can blip out and blip back in and see if that helps everybody.
Okay, I'll go really slow this time. Right. For the Public Art and Cultural Commission, the committee recommends the appointment of Shirley Whitesides to be appointed to fill the unexpired seat vacated by Ms. Watson, Valeria Watson. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. With the motion and a second, I'll do a roll call vote for approval. Mayor?
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore?
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley?
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney?
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner?
Aye, and that worked. So
Okay, great. Councilwoman Whistler?
Aye.
And myself, aye. And that concludes that portion. I'll kick it back to you, Mayor.
Okay. So is everyone still having issues?
I think it's fine now. It seems to have gone back. It was a little crazy. Yeah.
I'm okay.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. We have the informal discussion public comment. So this is the remaining portion of our agenda. We have, I think, 12 folks signed up to speak. And so I'm going to read some instructions. Staff will now connect live calls from our speaker queue for informal discussion and public comment. Again, we are only taking callers who signed up in advance. Callers, you will first hear staff inform council that you're next to speak. Then you'll hear an automated message letting you know you're unmuted and live in the meeting. You may begin speaking after the automated message. If you accidentally drop out of the speaker queue, just redial the number and meeting code, press *3 to rejoin the speaker queue. You will have 3 minutes to comment, and at the end of the 3 minutes, you will hear a bell and staff will ask you to wrap up your comment. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to staff to conduct the public comment period.
Council, our first caller is Victoria Estes from South Asheville.
Members of council, I'd like you to imagine something if you can. Imagine having everything that you owned crammed in a backpack that you have to carry around. Imagine not being able to come home after work and shower, wash your clothes, and climb into your warm bed. Imagine the state of your mental health, knowing that you have no financial security and nobody to help you. This is what our houseless folks in Asheville experience every day. Now imagine that you finally were gifted a tent and a sleeping bag, and you found somewhere quiet to set it up so you could get a peaceful night's rest. But then you get a notice that everything you own will be taken from you if you don't leave your camp. Imagine not knowing where you'll go, but knowing that wherever you go, it will only be temporary until you are told to leave again. That is violence. Not caring for one another, but instead removing what meager possessions they own and uprooting the tiny amount of security they have found is violence. The city likes to claim it is trying to help our houseless community, but anyone who is out in the streets actually providing aid to these folks knows that that's not true. Our shelters are at capacity, and they cause more harm than they alleviate. Many of them are faith-based and require someone to be in urgent need before allowing them to stay. And these barriers make it impossible for people to get the help they need. Meanwhile, the city is actively working to perpetuate harm against these folks by constantly sending the police to harass and detain them. I am tired. We are tired of having to beg our government to care for these folks, to address the root of the problem by offering housing and health care. Moving these encampments does nothing but harm our communities. I am tired of seeing the city pander to well-off tourists and rich white homeowners. What we are witnessing is a war on poverty. As someone who works in the streets to provide aid to my community, it is obvious that many of my houseless friends suffer from PTSD, mental health problems, addiction, and abuse. Many of them are unable to afford even the basic medical care they need, and many of them are unable to work a steady job. That does not mean that they are worthless. It means that they need our support. We need to be investing in our community and uplifting those who need that support. We need to be following the lead of places like Austin, Texas, where the city allocated a budget to buy and maintain an entire hotel to serve as a grounding point for folks suffering chronic homelessness. We need to be offering these folks health care and resources so that those who are able can lift themselves from poverty and have a fighting chance at attaining financial security. Many coaches have said that a team is only as strong as their weakest member, and that is also true for communities. When some of us suffer, all of us suffer. I too would like to live in a city where I don't have to walk down the streets and see folks sleeping in unused doorways. But I don't want these folks to be hidden or swept away. I want to know that they are being cared for and given a chance to thrive. But I will not sit idly by and wait for you all to take action. I will continue to show up every day to provide my community with the support that they need, because I have seen what is possible when a few caring souls put their mind together to overcome the oppression that the state perpetuates. I hope you will do what is right, and I hope you will listen to us. Please tell them not to close these camps. You will receive pushback. Thank you.
Council, this is Paul Schulman from West Asheville.
Yes, good evening. I really can't say it better than Victoria just said, and I don't have much to add other than really just letting you know there's a lot of people in the community who see what's going on, who see how our houseless neighbors are being treated, our fellow Ashevilleans, and just how blatant it is that tourists and people who stay in hotels are on the minds of much of City Council and are the focus. And really, like, so clearly, the desire is to treat these people who come into Asheville, maybe spend some money and leave much better than the people who live here every single day. And it's really shocking to me. I mean, in addition to being a human rights violation, which should be enough to get any city council to act, just that it's so blatantly obvious that our community is being sidelined so that tourists can be welcomed into this town and continue to extract resources from it, while people are forced to find a new camp, knowing that there's an eviction order there. And it seems like City Council's goal is to eliminate these camps, and that's absolutely heartbreaking. For those of us who live in houses, to just think for a moment, if you can join me in that thought exercise, what it would be like to have someone show up and say, you're out in 7 days. I mean, to call it destabilizing is an understatement. And yet this is what is being inflicted on our neighbors. It's completely unacceptable. And I really wish the tourists who are being welcomed in on red mats are actually shown how the city of Asheville really feels about its citizens. Thank you.
Council, our next caller is Melly Noyes from West Asheville.
Greetings, City Council. Tonight, I'm joining my friends who are speaking with rage and compassion to advocate for our houseless community, whom the city has recently given very little options as to where they can safely shelter in place during a pandemic per CDC guidelines. We are calling for an eviction moratorium. From what we're hearing, all camps on city property has been given 7 days to move. Surely this is illegal. How is it possible to define an imminent safety concern when evicting several camps at once? You're creating chaos and spreading COVID. Furthermore, it should not be any nonprofit's job who is dedicated to stable housing to evict people from camps. Also, to any stably housed person in Asheville who may witness what you consider to be a, quote, safety concern at an encampment, I beg you to mind your damn business. Unless you yourself are willing to learn how your gentrification causes harm and ask folks how you can help with their basic needs, do not call APD and do not use the Asheville app. The real safety concern is the trauma that is imposed upon them when cops come to clear them out. Evictions are violence. City aesthetic is not as important as basic needs. Housing is a human right. And with a third of your police department gone, most of the equity-focused budget work has been done for you. Good thing, because your survey was taken down as soon as the defund movement began to give input. That $4 million worth of cop salaries could be redistributed to housing, zoning, and services dedicated to our houseless community. From the interviews the Human Relations Commission has had with various community leaders, we've learned on average it costs $15,015 to provide housing and services a year to one person, as opposed to $50,050 we spend on emergency services when their basic needs are not met. It's literally cheaper to take care of people. And furthermore, no community leaders recommend that cops show up to respond to concerns with encampments. So it's a good thing so many cops have quit so that you can invest in community services that people need. Perhaps even help Homeward Bound pay for the days in on Tunnel Road. Until then, houseless camps should continue to take up space that is rightfully theirs. Your short-term solution for shuffling them around is abusive and likely illegal during a shelter-in-place. So we demand an eviction moratorium now. And in the wake of the murder of Daunte Wright, there's no patience for cops coming in to carry out any abuse right now. So defund APD and stop the evictions, or you'll be held accountable.
Council, this is Veronica Coit of West Asheville.
Hello, Council. I took some time to find the CDC's encampment considerations because it didn't seem like anybody had actually read those. Clearing camps can cause people to disperse throughout the community and break connections with service providers. This increases the potential for the spread of infectious disease. They recommend working with community coalition members to improve sanitation of encampments, ensuring that restroom facilities have functional water taps, are stocked with hygiene materials and bath tissue, and remain open 24 hours a day. In an area where a structure is not available, they recommend providing portable bathrooms and hand washing stations or hand sanitizer. That's a very basic need. Having that small amount of security and safety can mean so much to someone's peace. Have you considered for a moment how that small thing that the city could provide might ease some of what's being reported? And I ask you to sit with what was asked of you earlier. You were asked earlier where these people go when they are yet again, sent away. The answer you gave was they are told of resources. That's not an answer. And sending out one social worker to assist at an encampment removal is insulting. You have to do better. You can't continue on the path that you've been on. We have to do better.
Council, our next caller is Greenleaf Clark from North Asheville.
So when I hear y'all talking about the crisis of people being unhoused in town, it sounds like most of you council members are at a loss for how to solve it. Perhaps you could just listen to those of us who have actually been on the ground actively every day, working with these communities in crisis. Maybe, just maybe, we actually know what we're talking about. more so than Gwen Whistler and her $60,000 house on Kimberly Avenue. Part of what I can tell you from firsthand knowledge is that Esther is lying. No, the city has not provided enough capacity for everyone. And let's be abundantly clear that when we're accounting for that, shelters that only shelter people when they have photo ID, or that they're only sheltering people when they're willing to get rid of their dog, or when they submit to being searched, do not count as sheltering people. Deborah Campbell oversees the department that could single-handedly interrupt the crisis of people becoming unhoused. Defund the police. And guess what the secret is? Just stop unhousing people. The police are causing this, and you have the power to stop them, so do it. Establish a moratorium on evictions immediately and camp removals immediately. You're going to hear this a few more times tonight because the people of Asheville are enraged. These past couple weeks have been a showcase of the inhumanity and cruelty of this system. Last Thursday, about 20 people were kicked out of their home on Cherry Street, told to make themselves invisible because their very existence was inconvenient to some rich Karen in Montford. And I know you all weren't there because you don't get your hands dirty by directly creating human suffering like that. No, you just give the orders and keep your hands clean. Now, the same type of removal order has been issued for Aston Park, Martin Luther King Park, the river, and potentially every other park. You're taking away everywhere these people have to go. And you haven't even done the work to create the housing for these neighbors. You let some other organizations do the work for you. Homeward Bound spends $10 to $12 million of the community's donations to house just 15% of our unhoused neighbors in town. And then you call it a day. And now you have all this money and you're confused about what your top priority needs to be on how you spend it. Of course, it doesn't seem like a priority if you are in the privileged situation that some of you are. But in the meantime, do not dare remove a single other camp. There are 500 of our friends and neighbors out there with nowhere to go, and they are getting thrown out of everywhere that they try to exist. Let them live, let them exist, let them have some morsel of dignity and humanity and security, because if you continue to be complicit in this process, it will be nothing short of you declaring war on the poor of this city. And that is a fight you will be on the very wrong side of, and it is a fight you are not going to win.
Council, this is Jonathan Wainscott from West Asheville.
Council, our next caller is Rosemary Farley from North Asheville.
Hi, I just want to reiterate all that's been said and perhaps add a couple of perspectives as well. I'm getting to the end of a social degree. I have one semester left, and what I can tell you is that the number one determinant of a space, a community of being safe is the ability for the people who inhabit that space to have stability. So by continually moving people and forcing them to use resources to try and survive, lose resources along the way, etc., you're creating the violence that you say is such a gigantic issue. And also, let's get to that. What is this violence that is a gigantic issue? If you don't mind my asking, I never heard about it. What is violence that's a gigantic issue is the spread of COVID. If we're literally talking about dollars spent to minimize harm, someone getting COVID and having the inability to pay for medical care, and what the burden that has financially on a community is significantly more than simply allowing people to stay where they are and mitigate, this violence that you say is this big issue that I just don't buy. If people have stability, if people are able to maintain their resources, this violence doesn't take place. Also, again, what Greenleaf said, we don't have enough shelters. That's a lie. And also a lot of shelters require people to either submit to religious situations that are uncomfortable for them, or perhaps in violation of their autonomy as people to be queer, to be non-religious, to be whoever they are. It has these curfews that are just like really inhumane, and again, don't allow people to have autonomy. A lot of them don't allow people to smoke, and again, do we really want people packed in shelters during COVID? Even if that was a valid resource, that is really not a good idea. And I hear you guys saying that you are working on alternatives, but until you have them, right? Until you have alternatives for everyone to be up off the street, this doesn't make any sense. You're just moving people around, forcing them further into the margins, further into more danger. And again, spreading COVID around the city. I just don't see what the big deal is. I don't know why you can't just leave people be, allow them to create stability. This is such a waste of resources. I'm ashamed that my taxpayer money goes to this. It's really embarrassing. So that's what I have to say. Please stop. Just stop doing this. Thank you.
Council, this is Jonathan Wainscott of West Asheville.
Hey, it's Jonathan. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello.
We can hear you.
I just wanted to. Okay, cool. I just wanted to say that I'd heard some impatience with Deborah Campbell not acting more quickly on filling the vacancy of our Department of Equity and Inclusion. And I just wanted to remind everybody that the city of Asheville survived for 8.5 months with an interim manager, and when Deborah Campbell took over, we had an interim attorney. That interimship, I guess, was about 6.5 months, and that was with 3 months' notice when Robin Curran left. And then a month after Deborah got here, she had an interim police chief. All of that happened pre-COVID, pre-2020, and everything. So I know that people are anxious for that process to get underway, but it's a lengthy process, and it needs to be done with great care. And I know that there's just a tremendous sense of urgency in the community for all the things, and we can't do all the things right this second. So just offering some hang in there, everybody, energy to everybody, and thanks for all the work that you're doing. Okay, take care.
Council, our next caller is Rachel Bliss from downtown.
Hello, this is Rachel Bliss, and I'm calling to echo what many others have already said about our homeless population. I suggest that each of you get out into the parks and into these encampments and get to know the people. Last year before COVID hit, since I live downtown, I talked to a lot of homeless people. And really, they're not that much different than you and I. And if they are, they probably have some mental problems and they really do need your help. You have so much at your command. If they could say, I know the mayor or I know the councilwoman, I mean, they could get much farther than they are right now. Please do try to meet them and develop a relationship. And also, I'd like to comment about some talk of raising the sales tax. You know that sales tax is the most regressive tax there is. And it doesn't really hurt high-income people or middle-income people that much, but it does hurt the poor, even 1/4 cent. And I also heard that you were talking about looking into the food tax. That is even worse. Everybody needs food to live, and food stamps is not enough per month to feed a person. So please try to stay away from sales tax if you can. And I suggest that you open up public lands. There's plenty of public lands here, and that's pretty much what our encampments are doing right now anyway. They're trying to go into public lands, and they get torn away. That's everything that they own is in those tents. And when somebody comes and just sweeps it away, they have nothing. They may not have friends that can help them. They may have lost contact with all their friends. One day I was walking along Patton Avenue and I saw a homeless person, and he was going to go into the bushes. And, it must really be bad when you feel that you have to go around like you're a stray animal and stay out of public sight. A lot of people are camping out in the woods where nobody will find them, where there may be rats that will crawl around on them, or it's just inhumane the way we treat our homeless people. So please, and also, I'm not familiar too much with the Ford property that you voted on tonight. I guess it's over by Deaverville. I could be wrong. But have you actually talked with the people in Deaverville, what they want? Thank you.
We're just making sure there isn't anyone else, because we had some more folks signed up. Staff, do we have anyone else in the caller queue?
Mayor, we were trying to contact a few more people here in these final moments, but no, we currently don't have anyone else in the caller queue.
Do we want to give it a minute? I guess, Beth, I'm asking you.
I currently we have no one to bring in the call right now. We've gone through and emailed and texted everyone, and Sarah was trying to quickly call through the remaining people, but as of right now, we have none.
Okay. Well, I think we're gonna adjourn then. Unless I'll talk slowly here, just in case you tell me someone's on. We do have a second meeting in this month of April, so in 2 weeks from today. All right. With that, I'm gonna adjourn the meeting. All right, we're adjourned. Good evening.